Hello, friends. Welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Universe Podcast. This is Matthew, one of your hosts. We were on hiatus for a little while I was trying to get our co-host situation nailed down, and I'm super excited because Jeff Randle of the MCU podcast, as well as some other great projects who I've been a big fan of for a long time, has agreed to sign on, be my co-host. Jeff, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, sir. I'm not sure what I've gotten myself into. This is a this is a fandom that I am not quite as big a fan of as I am the MCU, but I do quite enjoy the Star Wars verse.
Yeah,
much of that that deep, rich continuity we talk about on the other podcast, and I've had a lot of fun with Star Wars products, video games, and books, and some of the films. and I'm excited to get this kicked off and start talking about these things.
Yeah, me too. It's funny because I've been talking with Matt a little bit, your other co-host on the MCU cast, as well as in general about the idea of getting this going. And I know on one of those episodes you said something about how you didn't have time to do the work of editing and putting it together, but if you had the chance to co-host, you'd be happy to do it. And so I kind of wrote back in and said, challenge accepted, and here we are. So so let's kind of just get started. I think some of the people listening may be people who know our other podcasts. Some may just be hearing us for the first time. And what I'm really excited about we're going to do on this podcast is kind of take a look back at just the wide range of Star Wars media that's out there. And so today, we're going to be kicking off with The Mandalorian and doing an episode on episode 1 of The Mandalorian and then kind of doing a rewatch of it. And in time, we're probably going to do rewatches of the movies, of some of the other TV shows. I think I have some other people lined up to do a rewatch of the Clone Wars, which is super exciting. So I'm really looking forward to kind of just diving into this wide range. And let me just start with, I know you said you were kind of a big fan of the universe. What really drew you into Star Wars first? Do you have kind of a memory of like what first got you into it?
Well, lightsabers have always been super cool because it's basically swords.
It's really true. Laser swords.
Yeah, it's laser swords that you get to beat your friends up with when you're a kid. Did
you ever use the inside of a tube of wrapping paper as a lightsaber when you were like 6 or 7 or
who didn't?
14 or 15?
I used the wrapping paper. My mom got so mad because I destroyed so many rolls. And but I started when I was very young is when the episode 1, the unspeakable episode came out. And being a little kid, you don't really think about things like story continuity or things that make sense. You're just like, man, it's a laser battle in space. It's amazing. So, I got kind of into it from that. And then from there, the things that really got me were the video games, especially the Battlefront 2 video game on the original Xbox was phenomenal.
Nice.
The Jedi Knight, Jedi Academy series of games, like that was one of the best games that I've played, or some of the best games that I played. I was a really big fan of Star Wars: The Old Republic when it came out. I actually never, when people talk about video games for Star Wars, they're like, oh, you played KOTOR, right? You played Knights of the Old Republic. And it's like, no, actually, I haven't. That's the one, major property that, everybody loves that I have not played through.
Yeah.
But, I love The Old Republic. And I, based on The Old Republic, I read the Deceived book that follows Malgus, and it was so good. That was a bit more recent though, in more recent years.
Yeah.
And yeah, I didn't watch the Clone Wars when it came out. Well, I didn't watch the series when it came out because I was put off by that animated film, The Clone Wars.
Yeah, it's a pretty bad movie. And even season 1 of the, I have come around to think of Clone Wars as a fantastic TV show, and that it kind of makes the prequels a lot more watchable, oddly enough. But the first season of Clone Wars as well is pretty rough.
Yeah, you're not the first person to tell me that, actually. Mm-hmm. Both of those points, actually, that the Clone Wars series makes it more watchable, and also that it's a little bit of a slog to get through to start it. And I think the major thing that I was told that blows my mind is that all of the or not all of, but most of the stories from the Clone Wars, the series, are not actually continuous, like in one, flowing forward timeline, one logical timeline of like you watch this and the next episode is the next thing. It's like it's jumping all over the place.
It is. Oh, go ahead.
It's crazy to think about.
Yeah. Well, and it's fun too because I know on the other cast I've often heard about how much you liked the pod idea that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. did of having like, instead of one full story over a season, having like 3 or 4 stories.
Yes.
And Clone Wars actually did that. It's shorter clumps, but you often have like one particular story will be a story arc will be maybe like 3 to 5 episodes. And so it allows you to explore like, okay, this one mission that a bunch of clones go on, or like this one Jedi gets trapped in a certain area, and so we've got 4 or 5 episodes about it. And it's a fun storytelling technique, especially because, as you said, it jumps around in time a little bit. But it allows for, I always thought a story something like the fall of Anakin Skywalker is such, for that story to make sense, it has to be done with a lot of subtlety, and it has to be done slowly. And, the prequels just did it so clumsily, I think in part because they're terribly written, but in part because I just think it was just not enough time. And the Clone Wars really, over 8 seasons, I think over 6 seasons of television, it shows the slow decline and fall of Anakin Skywalker and of the Jedi themselves and of the rise of the Sith. And it's a really fun bit of storytelling. And I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts when you get a chance to watch it.
Yeah. I remember when I was younger, between episodes 1 and 2, Anakin was a very young child in the first one. And, that's why you identify with him when you're a little kid, is he's a little kid too. It's like, that could happen to me. And in episode 2, when he's like significantly older, I found myself going like, when the hell did that happen? Like, where's all of that time going? Like, why aren't we talking about that? And then when it got to the third one, by that time I was in high school, and I just didn't even care about timing at that point. It was just like, I do the flashy thing. I want to see the flashy thing. Come on.
Well, I think this is going to be a lot of fun because you and I hadn't realized unfortunately making me feel very old because I was in college when the first prequel came out.
Sorry.
But we come from very different generations in that regard because I'm someone who, for me, it was the original movies, but my mother always joked that when I was a young kid, she didn't need a babysitter for me because if she needed to run out to the store for an hour or so, if she just put Star Wars, like the original New Hope, in the Betamax machine, yes, listeners, there did used to be a Betamax before VHS and before DVDs. If she just put that in that machine, she knew I was not going to get into any trouble because I would just be glued to that television set. And the first movie I remember seeing in the theater was Return of the Jedi. I didn't get to play. I think most of those video games came out when I was older and when I was not really in the video game phase. When I was a teenager, there was a game called X-Wing, which is it was basically like a flight simulator combat thing, but it had a pretty fun storyline that it really got into. But now that more recently I've gotten much more into video games, I'm excited to kind of find some emulators and go back and play some of those games. And I'm looking forward to the conversations you and I will be able to have about, both like kind of like establishment media stuff that we have, the movies and the official TV shows, but also, some of the books, some of the video games, because there's just such a richness to all those stories that are out there.
Yeah, and you can finally see, if you didn't already know, why Ki-Adi-Mundi is a badass.
For sure. Have you ever read the Darth Bane books?
I did not.
They're interesting because they go deep into the history of the Sith, and they kind of the newest movie actually quotes from them a lot. But they are proof of both just how interesting ethical discussion in terms of Star Wars can be, and that there are some Star Wars writers who should never, ever, ever write romance. Because, oh my God, is that storyline painful.
Yep, okay. That's one of the things that I found interesting, though, about the Star Wars universe is that the proverbial good guys, in quotes, you can't see my air quotes, but I did it. The good guys, so to speak, are these people who cut themselves off from all emotional ties, presumably. And that just as a human, that just does not seem like a good idea, because you're emotionally distancing yourself from everyone around you, and kind of ostracizing yourself by choice.
It's a very good point, and it's something that I think is interesting because, as both the movies and the show us, it's Anakin's inability to cut himself off, and the fact that he does, fall in love with someone, even if it's a very poorly written romance. It's he does fall in love with someone, and that does wind up being his downfall to an extent. And it's when you and I start rewatching the movies, I'm going to be really excited to get into that conversation, because I think it's kind of subtle, and I think some of the writers thought about it and some didn't. But I really like the idea of looking at, like, the Jedi are the good guys, but they had some problems too, and maybe they're kind of that sort of celibate, cut themselves off from everything wasn't really the best way to handle things, and may have had something to do with what wound up happening to them.
Yeah. We're starting with the Mandalorian, though.
Yep.
Exceedingly few Jedi in this tale.
Which I gotta say, I'm really liking it. And we're gonna put this out quick. So today's episode and then our next few episodes will be on the Mandalorian. We're doing kind of a little bit more of an intro today, but then in later episodes we'll just jump right into each episode of the show. And what we're going to try and do is do we're always going to be spoiling the particular episode this episode's about. So we're assuming that if you're listening to this, you have either watched episode 1 of The Mandalorian, or you are planning to just not watch it and you don't care if you get spoiled. Jeff, you and I have both seen the full series, I believe.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And so what we're going to try and do is, if you've seen the whole series and like us, you're kind of enjoying rewatching it, the second half of these episodes will be a discussion of this episode in light of everything else we know. But if you've only watched the first episode yet and you kind of want to watch along with us, then don't worry, we will keep this part of the conversation just about what we already know and not reveal spoilers for what comes next. So let me just start, Jeff. What were kind of your initial thoughts going into The Mandalorian? Like, how did you feel about were you super excited for the show coming out? Were you kind of nervous about it? What was your take on from what you saw?
Well, considering the quality of the films recently, I was kind of just on the fence, like, it's going to be a thing. I've always been kind of intrigued by the whole idea of the Mandalorians and this kind of warrior race of, like, weapons are my religion kind of thing, kind of people. Mm-hmm. And it's always been an intriguing thing, and especially knowing how great of an actor Pedro Pascal is, I was kind of intrigued. I was kind of, I had my hopes up maybe, and then after watching it, I was like, oh, yep, all in. Let's do this. We're watching the whole thing.
Yeah, I was coming at it from a similar standpoint because I love Star Wars content. I wanted new Star Wars content. I think you and I are different on some of the later movies, and that's going to be exciting because, like, I loved Last Jedi and Rogue One. But one thing I'd always kind of, this is kind of tied into some of the stuff you and I know you and Matt have talked about continuity. I love world building, and I love seeing what's happening kind of below the headlines, like, okay, the big, galaxy defining stories are happening by Luke Skywalker and Rey and Finn and all them, but what's kind of the person on the street doing in the Star Wars universe? And
what else is going on?
Yeah, right? And, like, what's kind of like how the first Spider-Man movie was all about just, like, the cleanup after, Avengers and things like that. Like, I like to see, like, what happens to just, Joe Soldier after the Galactic War against the Empire. And I think that's what I was most excited about with The Mandalorian. And just in this first episode 1, we totally get that.
Yep.
That's, I think, one of the things that first got me in was when I realized, like, wait a minute, this is actually about, like, what's just happening to normal people, if anyone's normal in the Star Wars universe.
I don't know, man. It looks like it's dangerous to be a normal person in the Star Wars universe.
Certainly there's a large number of big monsters on, it seems, every planet that anyone ever goes to.
Yeah, like, why would people live there on any of those? Like, as a reasonable person, like, if you're just a taxi driver on, this frigid area or this frigid planet, like, why not do something else somewhere else instead of being possibly eaten by these giant freaking walruses that are big enough to take down like your
ships,
spacecraft?
yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah, it's an interesting part of the CGI department has discovered their ability to make big monsters, and ever since the Rancor, it seems they've not let that go. You want to do a quick recap of the episode for people who maybe saw it a little while ago and haven't gone back to it?
So like a Mandalorian 5 kind of thing?
Yeah, Mandalorian episode 1. Just what happened?
Well, he got a bounty.
Yep.
That's about it. No, we've got this bounty hunter that shows up in absolute style into a cantina. Walks in the door. Everybody looks at him like, "Hey, man, I'm gonna fight you because that's my thing.
Yeah,
I'm written to fight somebody when they walk in the door." And he shows them why that's a bad idea, and gets his prize. And that I like that establishing bit there to just show how much of a badass we're dealing with here.
Yep.
So our badass goes back, takes his prize back, or prizes, because he just gathers them all up at once. Like a true an MMO player, he does all of his quests and then goes back to the quest hub.
Go to turn in all at once.
Yeah, you turn them in all at once because that's efficient, right?
Yeah.
So
best way to level up quick and then sell all your gear and get new one.
Yeah. He did exactly that. We're just watching an MMO being played here. That's all this is.
Anyway, go on.
So, he gets his prize, turns them in, gets his new pieces of gear, and then gets a new quest. Except this quest is super special. He's got to go to a different quest hub, or not a quest hub, different quest giver. Yeah. And this one is epic and will likely need a party. This is intense. And he's given a very small amount of information and ends up going to a different planet where we meet Nick Nolte's character, who is amazing.
Yes.
I'm so happy that we got multiple episodes of him in it. Anyway, Nick Nolte's character helps him to learn how to traverse this area. He gets a mount, and this is just an MMO. I'm describing an MMO.
There's even a mount training scene, which is a little ridiculous, but eventually he levels up and is able to ride the mount.
Yep, he's able to ride the mount across this wasteland, and then goes to try to retrieve the prize. Shows off again how much of a badass he is, and then we find Baby Yoda, who is really the whole point of this series.
the character that launched 1,000 plushies.
Yes. Oh my God. I swear, if Disney isn't making a mint off of Baby Yoda plushie stuff, then they're doing it wrong.
I just saw that the Build-A-Bear Workshop is now licensed to make Baby Yodas, and I was like, okay, that's where it's beginning.
That's where it is. Oh my God.
Yeah, so let's kind of talk about different parts of the episode. I will say, one of the reasons why I love this show so much, and I love everything else in the Star Wars universe, but most of it is not what I'd call gritty. It definitely had a very there were some interesting storylines it talked about, but it was always pretty PG. This was not the Netflix Marvel universe by any means. It was everything was every death was pretty clean. The lightsaber wounds were all cauterized, and there was never too much blood or gore, and it just sort of felt very safe in a lot of ways. And Rogue One pushed that a little bit, but it's overall kind of a very kid-friendly thing.
Yeah,
so
except for the emotional turmoil and devastation of your heart at the end of it. But we can talk about that later.
Yeah, but the fact that 30 seconds into this show, a bad guy is literally cut in half by a door. By the way, why don't we have some safety features on the doors?
Right? But my garage door is better than that.
But the moment when I heard the thump of part of that guy's body hitting the floor, I was just
saw his legs.
I was just okay, we are doing something totally new in Star Wars, and I am so here for it.
Yes, that whole. That's the establishing of the character right there.
Yeah.
And when they got into that and we saw exactly how far he was willing to go to defend himself in a bar, and he could have let that one guy crawl away. It probably would have been the right thing to do, but he was he's Mandalorian. You don't screw around with Mandalorians.
Well, and part of what I like about it also is, at first it seems a little like he's being heroic, like, oh, this poor guy is getting bullied and he's there to rescue him. And you realize just like, no.
Nope.
I don't care if you bully him, but like that's my prize. That's the guy I got to take in.
That's my bounty.
Yeah.
I'm going to go put him into this ice cube that was only developed for this probably 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, that was one of there were a couple of points of the continuity that I was a little like, about 15 years ago, Boba Fett was deeply surprised that you could use carbonite freezing, and now it's just like comes standard on a Mandalorian ship, I guess. I mean,
yeah.
Maybe technology advances pretty quick in this universe, but that was a little surprising.
Yeah, maybe he went back, to his tribe and was like, guys, you would never believe what I have discovered is the best way. This is the best way to transport any bounty. Holy crap.
For real. So what did you know about Mandalorians going into this show? Did you, like, I know you, especially from the video games and stuff, did you have much of a background about them, or were they all pretty?
Not much.
Yeah.
Most of the stuff that I did in video games was all Sith based. I was a Sith juggernaut in the Old Republic.
Nice.
And I liked the idea of the Mandalorians. I'd never kind of investigated too much into it. Like I knew that they were, all about weapons and just kind of a tribal type culture, but they were like almost super soldier-ish kind of. And so whenever I was kind of workshopping this idea of having a group cosplay thing where we would do kind of Star Wars, the Old Republic-ish type stuff, crossed over with Avengers, and I was like, Thor with a hammer saber would be amazing, but
oh, nice.
Mandalorian Punisher is where it's at.
Oh, I like that concept.
Yeah. That's I was like, mashup of Mandalorian Punisher would be amazing, and I need somebody to do that right now.
Yeah, I mean, and especially it's interesting like how the same kind of archetypes pop up. I knew very little about Mandalorians. I only knew, Boba Fett and Jango Fett, and also that it just seemed like there was a portion of the Star Wars fan base that was just utterly obsessed with Boba Fett for reasons that I never quite understood.
Right. It's like, this is a guy who literally did nothing.
Yeah.
He walked around, flew around, and then died.
And got eaten by a big, like, sand snake thing. Like,
yeah.
Not the most glorious death you could have. But I think especially given the Mandalorians are explained quite well in the Clone Wars, I will say. And it's a little bit of a spoiler here, but not much. But their planet is kind of one that's trying to stay neutral between the two sides of the Clone Wars, and it's a really fun storyline. But I think I was a little hesitant about the show because of that, just because I didn't want it to just be like, oh my god, badass combat all the time.
Right.
And so when we got Baby Yoda as well, I just was like, oh, okay, this is going to be I'm really curious where this is going to go. What was your take on kind of like we get introduced to the Mandalorian? He does all that stuff, and then we get Carl Weathers as the like you said, the quest giver in the tavern. What's kind of your take on what we kind of learn about the there being a bounty hunter guild and all this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that there would be a bounty hunters guild, because in any MMO there's guilds for everything, right?
Yep.
So having him be the guy for that, at first I was thinking, oh, Carl Weathers, cool. We get to see him for an episode or two, and then he's gonna go away, and we're never gonna see him again because Mando's running away with the baby.
Yeah.
When I first saw him, I was like, this is fun. It's a great cameo, and I didn't think anything of it after that. I was just he's a guild guy, and he gives out quests, and that's about it.
Yeah,
because in episode 1, that's really all we saw of him, and we didn't get any more until episode 2 when the return.
Which again, let's we won't spoil that quite yet. I just love knowing that there's a guild. Now I after this episode, I really want to know more about like what does this mean that there's a guild? What do they do?
Yeah, what are the rules?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's always so interesting to me when things like assassins or bounty hunters like have their own kind of clubs and stuff like that. And similarly, going a little further with the world building, it's a brief scene, but just the scene of our main character going to, I guess it's the foundry where they like make more Mandalorian armor and having the conversation with the armorer. Yep. I was so in for that. Like, just you get so much. It doesn't feel like exposition, but you learn so much more about the world that he's from and what's all happening there.
Yep, and seeing the kids run around in their little, I'm going to call it a hovel.
Yeah,
but,
that's fair.
You know, seeing the kids run around in their little area with their helmets on, like you get an idea. You finally get an understanding that like this is a lifestyle that gets put on you from a very young age.
Yeah,
and you know, I found myself wondering because I didn't know about the culture. And you know, the code or this is the way, any of that. I didn't know any of that going into it. So when I saw little kids running around, I was like, is that a thing that they just give kids helmets?
Yeah.
Like, are we doing that now?
It's I think one of the best things that a first episode can do is to make you really hungry to learn more, you know, set you up to want, like, to know, like, okay, what the hell's happening? How do I find out more? And this episode, I think, just does a great job with that, especially with these scenes with the Bounty Hunter Guild and the Mandalorians of, you know, it doesn't really tell you much, but it just says, like, okay, there's this whole big world, and we're going to be exploring that going forward.
Yeah, and one of the great things about it, though, is that even without knowing that the child is whatever race that Yoda was, like, even without that, it's a fantastic story on its own that exists in the Star Wars universe without even mentioning any of the rest of the Star Wars universe other than like the Empire.
Yeah.
And it was, you know, it was just a teensy little tidbit to say like, oh, the Empire's dead. You know, the Empire's not around anymore because, you know, things happen and they're gone.
Right.
And their money's no good anymore.
Yeah. Have you read the Terry Pratchett Discworld books?
Nope.
It's a great series of books. I think it's like 65 or 70 by now. And they're very humorous and they're kind of like parody. They're not serious works by any means. But one of the things I love about it is instead of it all being like the same story, he just creates a world and then like tells these stories that have nothing to do with each other except they're all set in the same world, you know? And like sometimes a character will be hearing the news and might hear like a line or two about something that was an entire book in a different series, you know?
Oh, that's awesome.
It's a great continuity kind of a world. And that's kind of how I felt about this, you know? Like what I'm excited about The Mandalorian is that I feel like I'm going to learn more about the Star Wars universe, but this isn't going to tell me anything I didn't know about the Skywalkers or Obi-Wan or the Empire, you know? It's not in any way trying to be part of that story. It's just saying, let's take this world and go off and do our own thing.
Yeah, like there are other things happening in this galaxy far, far away. Galaxies are big.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people in them. There's a lot that could be happening.
So our hero meets Nick Nolte's character, who I agree with you is awesome and has some great lines.
He's got the best line.
Yeah.
I've spoken. That's all you need.
I love
That's
that.
Your life.
I love that. I am sure that the number of times I'm going to hear a couple of geeks having a conversation and one of them be like, no, we're getting Chinese food tonight. I have spoken. I am sure that I'm going to get very sick of it eventually, but right now I am so here for it.
Oh, man.
And also, go ahead, yeah.
No, sorry. I was just...
Yeah.
I was saying yay.
What did you think of the whole thing with like learning to ride the creatures? Like you said, that part felt very like MMO-ish.
Yeah, it was the training montage, you know, where our hero levels up. It's one of those things where it feels kind of like they did that this whole series, where they established that he is a badass, and we see just how badass he can be. But then we also learn that he doesn't know everything,
right?
And he's not good at everything. He's just a dude who has, you know, been doing this bounty hunter thing for a while, and is good at that for the most part. But then there are things that take him off guard, or that catch him off guard, and he has to learn to adapt and overcome. And I like that he still has room for growth.
Yeah.
I like that our main character still gets to learn to do something else. And he still gets to be kind of like, this is a dumb idea. I don't think writing this thing is going to be a great thing, this huge boon for me.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh yeah, it does help. I can't traverse this myself.
I like the spin you're giving it, because frankly, it was one of the parts of the episode that kind of didn't really work for me, because it just felt very, I don't know, maybe I missed a detail or two, but it felt like I didn't really buy that we need, in a world of spacecraft and land speeders and stuff, that we needed these particular creatures to get to the particular place we're going, especially when the robot droid shows up without any sign that he used one.
Yeah.
So it felt a little unnecessary to me, but I do like that idea of showing us that he can learn and grow and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, later in the series, there's a lot of points where it's just like, what are you doing, man? You are flailing.
Yeah.
And he has to adapt and overcome.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's just another point where he had to do exactly that. And yeah, it is a little weird that the droid showed up, that IG-11 showed up, and I'm sorry, Taika Waititi bot showed up and just started blasting everybody without having to learn to ride a blurg, which is probably the worst name for a mount of all time.
It did feel like I kind of wonder who are the writers on this show, and are the writers people who absolutely are hardcore Star Wars people? Like, that scene a little bit felt to me like this is a show being written by people who aren't necessarily the hardest of hardcore fans, which in some ways I think is a good thing, because they're kind of like taking Star Wars in some new directions.
Yep.
But that felt a little bit like someone who doesn't quite get the crazy animals of Star Wars trying to give fans what they wanted and maybe not quite connecting entirely.
I feel like Nick Nolte was put in charge of naming this creature and was like, blurg.
Yeah.
And they were like, go with it. That's all we have. That's literally the best we've got.
Yeah, that seems entirely possible. So then we do get to the great big battle scene with the robot and Mando, and then finally that last scene of Mando killing the robot to protect the baby.
I was talking about the badass part where he jumps on the turret and takes out literally everybody.
Oh god, yeah. It was a fun fight scene. Like, I'm normally not a big fight scene guy, but that was pretty well done.
And they put in a good amount of humor along with it. Like they had the IG-11 bot being like, nope, it's over. I'm going to go ahead and self-destruct. And he's like, no, stop. Dear God, stop doing that.
Well, and partially I liked it because in the first half of the episode, you have the Mandalorian just being totally silent and barely saying any words. And I was a little worried we were just going to have him be like super stoic, never show any emotion guy. And so having him be like clearly frustrated and like you said, in a humorous way, that was a big relief. I was like, okay, no, we're going to have some humor in this.
He's a real person.
Yeah.
Yay. That's part of the thing that I think that the blurg mount bit was also about, is showing that he can get frustrated.
Yeah, that's true.
Especially with things that he thinks are just like, this is frivolous. I don't need to do this. Yeah. This is not how I need to approach this. And allowing the main character to get frustrated by things like that is part of what makes it a really good identifiable main character, like somebody that you can get behind and identify with their struggle.
Well, especially because part of what this sets up is, there's so much like honor and grace and like noble warriors of the kind of idea for the Mandalorians. And so seeing that kind of like turned on its head a bit of like, we're trying to be that, but we're also kind of in this ridiculous situation where we're riding on a stupid animal and then hiding in the dust. It's kind of a nice change, Yep.
It's nice to see the mighty brought low sometimes.
Exactly. So they have that pretty good combat, and then he jumps onto the moving gun and just totally takes people out. Also, the bad guys seem to not be completely terrible shots, which was a nice change. Like, they didn't go to the stormtrooper shooting ranges, but they actually learned how to shoot somehow.
It's the helmet. They don't have the helmet.
Yeah. Quick aside. In New Hope, the original movie, so much of that movie is so good, but there's a line where Obi-Wan Kenobi says that, only stormtroopers are so accurate with their blasters. And God, what a line that was not paid off in any other movie in that series.
Yep. The thing that I keep going back to when thinking about that is that in that first movie, they were not good shots on purpose. They were trying to corral these people into this, this direction to make it seem like they were bad shots and everybody was just getting away. But then they just never ended up being good shots again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of dumb.
It's like, come on, George. Let's
get a little consistency here. Speaking of consistency, did you catch that? Or maybe there's a reason that you know of, but just from what we know of in episode 1, the Mandalorian is giving a contract where he's told, "We want you to bring it in alive if you can," and then we find out the robot was specifically told to kill Baby Yoda. Were you kind of confused by that? Did you think that was a weird writing thing, or that there's a reason for that we'll find out later?
Yes, I thought it was weird, but the way that I just kind of headcanoned it was the IG-11 bot, they're hunter-killers, right? So my thought was he was told, you have these two options, and he was like, cool, kill it, heard.
Yeah.
And, going with it's either really difficult to capture and bring it in, or it's a lot easier to kill it and bring in proof. He went with the latter.
That makes sense. That's definitely especially given the kind of much more robotic nature of him. I did think that he was much more robotic than the droids that we've encountered up till now. Like, you think about someone like C-3PO or R2-D2, like, who really have so much personality. He felt really like an artificial intelligence, which was a fun choice, and that's kind of something I want to see. Like, is there like just the basic, droid model that doesn't have a big personality installed in it compared to, that's a cheaper version or something.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, if you're going to be an assassin, if you're going to be a hunter-killer bot, you don't need all of that emotion and all that other crap weighing you down, So let's strip it down to just the base, like, analyze the best way to take out my enemies kind of thing. And also don't ever let the proprietary technology inside you get in the wrong hands.
Yeah.
But, mostly strip it down to no emotion, kill everything. And I think that's what they went for on this one. And I think that Taika pretty much nailed it in his acting.
Mm-hmm. I think so too, especially at the very end where, I think if it had been any kind of like non-robotic bounty hunter that was just totally comfortable killing this, super adorable creature, I would have been like, that seems mustache twirly to me. But from a robot, it makes a lot of sense, that the robot would just be like, this is the asset.
I've analyzed the best way that this has to happen, and I have to kill it.
Yeah. So we get that beautiful shot, and I think it's just a fantastic bit of, cinematography of the Mandalorian and the robot staring at the baby. We know that the robot has his gun trained, and then you just hear and see a laser blast.
You see the reflection of the laser blast on the Mando's helmet, on his visor.
Did you have a moment at first where you thought that maybe he'd actually let the robot kill the baby?
I think that's what we were supposed to be led to, and I did for a brief moment go like, did he just let that happen?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we were supposed to feel, is that, we've seen this guy be just so brutal in the opening sequence and such a stone cold, guy, doing his thing. And when brought to this particular point in his life where he's got this contract and it's a child, like, you have to have that question of like, which way do I go about this?
Yeah.
And he obviously, wanted to bring it in alive because there's a higher reward.
Right.
But also, knowing his, try not to spoil too much. So knowing his mission and the fact that he was shocked that somebody else showed up with the same contract, and, knowing that he's a real person that can get frustrated with things, that can get, fed up with something that he sees as futile, and, him being presented with a child to protect, you kind of like, okay, well, is he gonna, yeah, is he gonna let this happen? And then he doesn't let it happen, and you're shown that he's a real person, and then you can really actually get behind him.
It was so well done because, like you said, often, like, a TV show will try to have that, like, maybe this guy's really that evil, but no, don't worry, he's not. And
it's okay.
Yeah.
He's good.
And yeah, normally, like, you're kind of like, come on, I never really believed it. But I, like you, watching it a second time, I'm surprised at how quick that scene is from laser blast to the robot falling over. Because my memory is that it felt like a long moment of me being like, wait, did he really just let him shoot the baby? Did that actually happen? Because, like you said, I flat out believed it would have been possible. And that to me is such good writing and such good, like, film, movie, TV making that really shows to me the quality of what we're dealing with here. Yeah.
It, bringing it back to my favorite fandom, or my main fandom, it felt a lot like this guy is the Punisher.
Mm-hmm.
And, coming into this situation, the Punisher, we know that the Punisher would save a kid, but we don't know that about the Mandalorian until this moment when he saves the kid.
Well, and even there, like, especially that last little moment of them, like, rubbing finger, the cooing finger and things like that, tells you that this is probably because, like, the Mandalorian cares about the kid. But there's still the possibility that this is just because, like, A, the Mandalorian doesn't want to split the prize with a robot, but also because, like you said, it's a higher price if he brings it in. Like, we're still not quite sure. What does this all mean?
Yeah. I get more money. I don't have to split it. I hate droids. We did get flashbacks of, we got the little bit at the beginning where he's like, no droids.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that's kind of rude. And then there was that flashback when the armorer was doing her thing, making his new piece, his pauldron, where there were flashes and flashbacks.
Yeah.
We're led to believe in that, in that moment, like, oh, droids were probably responsible for that, I guess. If we put those things together.
Yeah, it's not really quite clear, but certainly that
not at that point.
It's very clear that he's got some major PTSD kind of stuff going on. Again, actually, an interesting connection with the Punisher, and that given the period of time that's from, like, it being related to the droids would totally make sense because that's from the period of the clones versus the droids and the warfare and all that.
Yeah, telling you, man, Mando Punisher. That is the cosplay.
That's the crossover you're looking for.
Yep.
All right. I'm trying to talk about Matt Carroll about meeting up at Dragon Con. So if you can pull it together for Dragon Con this year, I'll be down.
Oof. I don't think I can do it for this year, but
in the future.
It's already January. Like,
yeah.
I should have been done by now.
Patreon goals for the future.
I swear.
All right. Let's now move into our spoiler section where we're going to start talking about how does this episode fit into the larger narrative? So I'll just quickly say for those who want to check out now, thank you so much for listening up till now. This podcast is going to be part of the larger Stranded Panda Network, which I know, Jeff, you and Matt are really kind of doing so much to kick off.
Yeah, it's mostly Matt.
Yeah.
I'm just along for the ride.
But it's basically going to be a way of kind of having a big old network of all these different fandom podcasts, the MCU cast, the DC On Screen podcast, Star Wars, Star Trek, Orville, The Watchmen. It's a great collection of things. You should definitely check it out. Please, I hope if you enjoyed this episode, please follow us. Please give us a 5-star review. Tell your friends about it, and we'll have great ways to get into the conversation on Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that. All that will be in the show notes. So with that, spoiler warning in 3, 2, 1.
He hates droids. Droids killed everyone he's ever loved.
Droids killed everyone he ever loved.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's well, and to me, the thing that I think, going back and watching this, having seen the rest of the show, I now know, of course, exactly why he cares so much about this baby. Because you see what happens to him, but also just what we're learning about the whole Mandalorian culture of the
foundlings.
Yeah, that it's about like they're kind of like an orphan race. I mean, which I just think is like, does this mean Baby Yoda's going to be a Mandalorian? Like,
oh my God, I want that so bad.
Right?
I want that Mando helmet on his little head with those big ass ears pointing out the side of it.
Well, I'm thinking,
I need that so bad.
Do you have to like shape the helmet to cover the ears so that it doesn't, it protects him or something? Or
I don't know, man. Either way, you got to do it.
Yeah,
I just need it.
Yeah, it's so good. But yeah, what else comes up for you? What else did you kind of thinking about this episode now with everything else you've learned? What kind of comes up for you?
I'm just, like after everything has gone through it all, this kid is 50 years old. The child is 50 years old and is still a little bitty baby.
Yeah.
And his charge now is to scour the galaxy looking for its people. And it's really easy. I say really easy. Like it would be really great writing for him to go like several seasons without finding anybody. Like it would be a great through line every single season to have like another clue, or another clue and another clue. But like eventually you got to find them, right? So once he does eventually find them, I want it to have been so long with him and the kid, where the kid is old enough to have to make the choice. Do I want to stay with the Mandalorian and become one of him, or do I want to go with this race of Yoda people, whatever they are?
Well, so you think that he was born like from Yoda people and then was just kind of stolen somehow?
I think so. I like to think so, at least. Because I know that there's, what is it, Yoda and Yaddle that's in the Clone Wars?
Yeah, I think so.
And, those are the only two that we know of that are that race. And, George Lucas has taken great care to make sure that nobody knows what that race is and never say that race's name.
It's funny because, like, if you, I got into the role-playing game for a while, and I worked at a role-playing, a gaming store, so I read through a lot of, like, Star Wars role-playing game books when I was on my breaks and stuff, and because I'm a total nerd. But that one race is just never mentioned. Like, that's how deep it goes, is, like, just nothing.
Yeah, he just leaves it out. Because apparently, even at the, young age of 50, they're able to do crazy things with the Force. And, he probably doesn't even know it's the Force.
Yeah. So I want to get to that in a second, but I actually have a very different theory, and I'm wondering if you think I'm totally off my rocker here.
Okay.
What if he's a clone?
What if he's a clone?
Yeah. Like, what if, like, there isn't actually those people are still around, but someone, like, found some, like, genetic material of Yoda or of someone else like that and, like, spun up some old cloning material.
It would make sense because when we meet the child, he's in his little space cradle.
Yeah.
That has a really solid follow mechanic.
Which is never explained,
Oddly
but
enough.
it's just kind of awesome.
Yeah. This remote controlled cart that is set to follow the Mandalorian.
I'm sure many parents have wished for that technology to become on the market.
Jeez. Oh, I swear, if I could just attach that to my kids. Anyway, so when we see him, we see him in this little, it almost looks like an egg, and it reminds me a lot of the technology that you see that's all like crisp and clean and almost like medically sterile.
Yeah.
On the planet.
Like Camino.
Camino, that's the one. Geez, I'm showing my lack of depth of knowledge.
Hey, listen, after listening to you be the one to like correct Matt on that all the time on the MCU cast, I'm kind of happy to be playing that role for once. So
good. So his little cradle egg looks a lot like that kind of technology and may well have been, from there.
Yeah, I could see that. And certainly, like, I think by the end of season 1, we don't really have that answered in any way. In some ways, I'm a little frustrated at the end of season 1 that there's still so much... Like, I feel like we just didn't learn anything about the mystery of all of this, and I would have liked to know somewhat more. But certainly there's a lot of big questions out there that I'm excited to see them keep exploring in the next couple seasons. Yeah.
I mean... one of the huge questions that I had at the end of it when he showed up was what's Gus Fring doing here? I thought he was dead.
Yeah. There's some good stuff to explore here. So,
what is it? What was his character? Grand Moff, wasn't it?
You mean in the show itself?
Yeah.
I you know what?
Giancarlo Esposito is the character, or is the actor name?
Right. Yeah.
Just Moff Gideon.
Moff Gideon. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, and that's another part of like, there's just all this stuff about like the imperial bureaucracy, and one thing I am curious about is, and I kind of, on the one hand, I'm a little curious to see if they explore this. On the other hand, I hope they don't screw it up. But you have some people in this show, a little bit in this episode, but especially later in the season, who clearly are like still like holding on to the Empire, and they think the Empire was a good thing, and that it brought, like, I kind of like that it's not just mustache.
The client.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just mustache twirlers, that it's people who actually really believed in this stuff.
Yeah.
And in the canon, 15 years later, we get to the First Order. And I don't want this show to be like the founding of the First Order. I want it to be kind of just off in the bushes and not super relevant. But I'm curious if we'll get a couple of hints about like how the First Order got started, or sort of what the transition was there.
Yeah. I mean, in the later episodes, I think it was like episode 7, where Werner Herzog, who's only ever listed as the client, when he's doing his little bit of monologuing about how the when the Empire was around, there was order, and like, what do you look around now? What do you see? It's definitely not order. It's chaos. Like, he's kind of right.
Yeah.
Like, he's not necessarily wrong about that. I mean, maybe they went about it the worst way, but they still had some semblance of order.
I mean, that's the scary thing about the fascism. Like Mussolini made the trains run on time, and it's. Yeah. I hope that people look at it and go like, the price we have to pay for that kind of order is not worth it. But you understand why some people are drawn to that, and it's, my only frustration, I think, with the early part of the Star Wars universe, and honestly most of it, is, that the big bads just seem like mustache twirlers. Like, why does Palpatine really want to become Emperor, except, mwahaha, I have power. And so it
unlimited.
Yeah, exactly. it is kind of fun to hear some of the Empire people being like, no, this is about, like, I think the world is a better place when it's all ruled by this Empire thing.
Yeah, you actually have like real motivations for these characters.
Exactly.
Until we get to Moff Gideon, and then it's just like, where did you come from? Why are you such a dick?
Yeah, I'm really excited when we get to his character, because that's kind of fun. As well as, we'll get to it when we get to episode 8, but the 2 stormtroopers just like shooting the shit,
Lord.
Telling jokes, and then one of them punching the baby. Like, oh my God.
Everybody talks about how like, stormtroopers are, they're the worst. They're terrible shots, and like they're unlimited quantities of them. You always see them showing up like as many as are needed to make it seem like an overwhelming force. Whatever, sure, but that they're not just like running around shooting at people the entire time. That they're just hanging out.
Yeah.
Back in the break room at one point, just like talking to each other, and they've got lives too. Like, this is a discussion that has come up from all the way back from Clerks.
Yeah.
In the Kevin Smith movie, it's like there were plumbers and roofers and like all of these mechanics and everybody who were on the new Death Star when it got blown up.
Yeah.
So like all of those innocent people are taken out, but like, not every stormtrooper is doing it because they're like, yes, I have to conform to the Empire and make the order. Like, that's not it. They're just trying to get a paycheck so they can go home.
See, and Matt Carroll says that Star Wars doesn't have the ethical questions that Star Trek has, but there's tons of ethical questions in here. There actually are. We're not quite getting to them yet, but I will say the Mandalorian gets to some great ethical questions that I'm looking forward to showing Matt wrong about. So that's going to be fun. We're almost about the hour mark. Is there any kind of like closing stuff you want to mention about this episode or kind of the season that you're looking forward to getting into?
I'm really looking forward to getting into talking about Cara Dune, because Cara Dune is back.
Yep.
This is the way. And yeah, I think we've done enough damage for now.
Yeah. Yeah, but this was a lot of fun, Jeff. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you and I can put together, because I think obviously we've got some good discussions here, some things we agree on, some things we see a little differently, and I'm looking forward to kind of seeing where this goes. And I'm glad you suggested The Mandalorian, because my original idea that we start with the movies would have meant our first couple discussions would have been about the prequels, and that would have been a little bit of a slog for our fans to get through. So I think we're starting on a higher note here.
Yeah, it's a little bit more timely and a little bit more widely received as positive.
Exactly. Well, and to people who are checking this out, thank you so much for being a part of us and being here as we kind of do our relaunch here. If you like what you heard, if you want to disagree with us or agree with us or just keep the conversation going, you can find us on Facebook or Twitter at Star Wars Universe Podcast. I think it actually might be a little bit different. Honestly, I created a Facebook and an email name, and I don't remember exactly what they are, but I'm going to put them all in the show notes and remember to have them to read them off for the next episode. And maybe I'll just re-record this part. We'll see. But as you can tell, we're kind of getting started here. But definitely do check that out. Be part of the conversation, because I think that's the Jeff, I know you guys love the feedback episodes you do with the MCU cast, and to me, what gets me into these universes is getting to talk to my friends about it. Like part of why I love the whole Stranded Panda idea is I feel like all of us are kind of wandering around with all these cool theories and ideas in our head, and we want just people to talk to about them. And this is a time for you and me to do that, but for the fans too. I want you guys to get to share your theories, share your ideas, talk about what you love, tell us how me or Jeff are completely wrong about something. Write into us. We'd love to hear from you. So all that'll be in the show notes. Please keep listening. Like I said, we may also be doing a series on the Clone Wars pretty soon. So keep an ear out for that. And thank you guys for listening, and we'll talk to you more soon.
Until next time, true believers. Oh, no, wait. That's wrong outro. Wrong outro. Sorry.